Wait, that necklace! Then he dropped to his knees and revealed the secret my mother had hidden for 30 years.
The night my husband hid me behind a curtain because he was ashamed of my dress, his billionaire boss saw the necklace around my neck, dropped to his knees, and whispered, "I have been looking for you for 30 years. Before sunrise, my marriage was over, and the man who treated me like nothing was begging me to save his future. Hello, my name is Claire Bennett. I am 34 years old, and until that night, I believed that being a good wife meant being patient, loyal, and quiet. I thought love meant supporting someone even when they forgot to support you. I was wrong. My husband, Daniel, worked for Caldwell Industries, one of the largest real estate companies in Chicago. When we first met, he was kind and ambitious. He used to say he admired that I could make a home feel warm without spending much money. But after 6 years of marriage and 3 promotions, the things he once admired became the things he criticized. He complained that my clothes looked ordinary. He disliked my job at a neighborhood library because it did not sound impressive. When his coworkers asked what I did, he said I was taking time to find myself, as if my real life embarrassed him. For months, Daniel talked about the company's 30th anniversary celebration. It would be held at the Grand Sterling Hotel. Politicians, investors, television reporters, and wealthy business leaders would attend. Daniel believed the party could lead to another promotion. At first, he told me spouses were not invited. Then, 2 days before the event, I found a cream-colored invitation in his jacket pocket. It clearly said, "Employees and their guests." When I showed it to him, his face tightened. "Fine," he said, "you can come. But please buy something appropriate." I understood what he meant. He wanted me to look expensive. We had enough money for a designer dress, but Daniel controlled our shared account. He said we were saving for a better house, although he had recently spent thousands on a watch and a golf membership. He gave me $100 and told me not to embarrass him. I found a simple navy blue dress at a small shop near the library. It cost $78. It fit me beautifully. It was not a famous brand, but when I looked in the mirror, I felt graceful. The shop owner, an older woman named Rosa, smiled and said, "A confident woman makes the dress valuable. The label cannot do that." Her words stayed with me. Before leaving home on the night of the party, I added the only jewelry I truly loved, an old silver necklace with a small blue stone surrounded by 2 tiny wings. My mother had given it to me shortly before she died when I was 12. She had told me, "If you ever feel alone, hold this necklace and remember that you were loved before you even knew my name." I never understood those words. I assumed she was speaking poetically. That night, I would learn their real meaning. When Daniel saw my dress, he did not smile. "Is that what you bought?" he asked. "I like it." He examined the fabric and found the small shop tag inside the collar. $78, he said. "The wives at this party will be wearing dresses worth more than our car. Then they should be very happy with their dresses," I replied. He did not laugh. During the drive downtown, he barely spoke. The Grand Sterling looked like a palace made of light. Crystal chandeliers hung above marble floors. A string quartet played near a staircase covered in white flowers. Everywhere I looked, people wore silk, diamonds, and perfect smiles. Daniel immediately changed. His shoulders straightened. His voice became deeper. He greeted executives like old friends and introduced himself to people who hardly knew him. But he did not introduce me. Whenever someone approached us, he stepped in front of me. Once a coworker asked Daniel, "Is this your wife?" Daniel laughed nervously and said, "Claire is just helping with something tonight." Just helping with something. The words hurt more than I expected. I had paid bills when he lost his first job. I had stayed awake helping him prepare for interviews. I had sold my grandmother's piano so we could make a down payment on our apartment. Yet in that ballroom, I was suddenly no one. Then Daniel saw Vanessa Cole, the company's vice president. She was young, elegant, and rumored to be the favorite for a new executive position Daniel wanted. He quickly pulled me toward a service corridor beside the ballroom. "Stay here for a few minutes," he said. "Why?" "Vanessa is meeting important people. I cannot have you standing beside me looking like you came from a discount store." I stared at him, certain I had misunderstood. "You want me to hide? Do not make a scene, Claire. This evening could decide our future." "Our future? You just told someone I was a helper." He looked toward the ballroom, worried someone might hear us. Then he moved me behind a heavy velvet curtain that covered the entrance to a private dining room. "Wait here until the speeches begin. Then you can sit at the back." Before I could answer, he walked away. For several seconds, I could not move. Waiters passed without looking at me. Music and laughter drifted through the curtain. I felt foolish, angry, and strangely calm. That was the first surprise of the night I did not cry. I stepped out from behind the curtain and decided to leave. But as I crossed the edge of the ballroom, the lights dimmed. A man in his late 60s walked onto the stage. Everyone applauded. It was Alexander Caldwell, founder and chief executive of Caldwell Industries. His face appeared in magazines, but he rarely attended public events after the death of his wife. He was said to be worth more than $4 billion. Daniel had once called him the most powerful man in the city. Mr. Caldwell began speaking about the company's history. I moved quietly toward the exit. Then one of the waiters bumped into me. A glass fell from his tray and shattered. Hundreds of faces turned in my direction. Daniel saw me, his expression filled with rage. But Alexander Caldwell stopped speaking. He was staring at my necklace. At first, I thought the blue stone had reflected the stage light. Then he walked down the steps toward me. The room became silent. He stopped only a few feet away. "Where did you get that?" he asked. His voice was shaking. I touched the necklace. It belonged to my mother. What was her name? Eleanor Bennett. The color disappeared from his face. He slowly lowered himself to one knee. Not as a romantic gesture, but as if his legs could no longer hold him. People gasped. Cameras flashed. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "Eleanor had a daughter," he whispered. "You survived." I felt the floor move beneath me. Daniel rushed forward. "Mr. Caldwell, I apologize. My wife should not be." Mr. Caldwell stood and cut him off. "Your wife," he said sharply. "You brought her here and did not introduce her." Daniel's mouth opened, but no answer came. Mr. Caldwell turned back to me. "Please come with me. There is something you deserve to know." He led me into a private office near the ballroom. Daniel tried to follow, but security stopped him at the door. Inside the office, Mr. Caldwell unlocked a leather case. He removed an old photograph of two young women standing beside a lake. One was my mother. The other was a woman I recognized from newspaper photographs as Margaret Caldwell, Alexander's late wife. Both women wore matching necklaces. Each had a blue stone and silver wings. Mr. Caldwell explained that my mother and Margaret had grown up together in foster care. They were closer than sisters. When they were 22, they designed the two necklaces as a promise that they would always protect each other. Years later, my mother worked as an accountant for Caldwell Industries when it was still a small company. While reviewing financial records, she discovered that Alexander's business partner, Richard Vale, was stealing money and secretly using unsafe materials in a housing project. My mother collected proof. Before she could give it to Alexander, a fire destroyed the company's records building. 2 employees died. My mother disappeared that same night. Everyone believed she had stolen money and escaped. I believed the evidence against her. Mr. Caldwell said, his voice breaking. "Margaret never did. She spent years trying to find Eleanor. Then, 30 years ago, we received a letter saying your mother had died in another state. We were told she had no children. I could barely breathe. My mother had not died 30 years earlier. She had raised me under the Bennett name and died 22 years ago after a short illness. She never told me about Caldwell Industries." Mr. Caldwell pointed to the necklace. "Margaret hid a tiny key inside each blue stone," he said. "She believed Eleanor might use hers to protect evidence." With my permission, he pressed the metal wings together. The stone opened. Inside was a key no larger than a grain of rice and a narrow strip of paper marked with numbers. I stared at the necklace I had worn for more than 20 years. My mother had placed a secret against my heart, and I had never known. The numbers belonged to a safe deposit box at a bank that had merged several times, but still operated downtown. Mr. Caldwell wanted to go there immediately. I refused. I had just discovered that my mother might have been framed by people connected to his company. I did not know whether I could trust him. "I need time," I said. He nodded. "That is fair. Take whatever protection you need. But please do not tell anyone about the key. Not even your husband." But the warning came too late. When I left the office, Daniel was waiting in the hallway. His anger had been replaced by excitement. "What did Caldwell tell you?" he asked. "Is there money? Are you related to him?" He did not ask whether I was frightened. He did not apologize for hiding me. He only wanted to know what my secret could do for him. "I am going home," I said. He grabbed my wrist. "Claire, do not ruin this for us." I looked down at his hand until he released me. "You ruined us before Mr. Caldwell ever saw my necklace." I left the hotel alone. At home, I packed a bag and locked the necklace inside a small metal box. Daniel returned after midnight. For an hour, he moved from apology to accusation and back again. He said stress had made him behave badly. Then he said I was too sensitive. Finally, he promised he had always believed I was special. "You believed I was a helper 3 hours ago," I said. He slept in the guest room. I did not sleep at all. The next morning, I called my mother's oldest friend, Aunt June. She was not my real aunt, but she had known my mother before I was born. When I mentioned Caldwell Industries, she became silent. "Claire," she finally said, "come to my house. Do not bring Daniel." At her kitchen table, Aunt June told me the part of the story Mr. Caldwell did not know. My mother had witnessed Richard Vale paying a city inspector to ignore dangerous construction. When she threatened to report them, Vale arranged the fire and blamed her for the missing company money. A frightened police officer helped her escape after realizing the evidence had been altered. My mother was pregnant with me. She changed her name and disappeared because Vale had threatened her unborn child. Why did she never tell me? I asked. Because Vale became powerful, June answered. And because someone inside Caldwell Industries continued sending warnings. Your mother never knew whom she could trust. June gave me an envelope my mother had left with her. On the front were the words for Claire, if the wings ever open. Inside was a letter. My mother wrote that the safe deposit box contained original ledgers, photographs, recorded conversations, and one document proving Richard Vale's fraud. It also contained proof that Alexander Caldwell had unknowingly benefited from the stolen money. She did not believe Alexander planned the crimes, but she feared he would protect his company instead of the truth. The final paragraph changed everything. My mother wrote, Claire, if you are reading this, do not use the truth to become rich. Use it to become free. Money reveals character, but power gives character a weapon. Choose justice before revenge, and when justice arrives, do not stand in its way. That afternoon, I hired an attorney named Maya Torres. We agreed to open the box with an independent investigator and record every step. Alexander Caldwell accepted our conditions. Daniel did not. Somehow, he learned the bank's name. Later, I discovered that he had searched my phone while I was showering. He contacted Vanessa Cole and told her I possessed documents that could damage the company. In exchange, he asked Vanessa to guarantee his promotion. Vanessa was not only a vice president, she was Richard Vale's granddaughter. That was the next shock. The night before we planned to visit the bank, someone broke into Aunt June's house. Nothing valuable was taken, but every drawer was opened. Across her bedroom mirror, someone had written 3 words in red lipstick, Avast DE. I wanted to cancel everything. Then I remembered my mother had spent her life looking over her shoulder so I could grow up safely. If I walked away, her fear would become my inheritance. The following morning, Maya, the investigator, Mr. Caldwell, and I entered the bank together. 2 security cameras recorded us opening the box. Everything my mother described was there. There were ledgers showing stolen funds. Photographs showed low-quality steel being delivered to construction sites. An audio cassette captured Richard Vale ordering the records building fire and demanding that Eleanor be blamed. But one newer envelope surprised all of us. It had been added years after my mother disappeared. The handwriting belonged to Margaret Caldwell. Margaret had discovered who was sending threats from inside the company. It was not Alexander. It was Richard Vale's son, Thomas, Vanessa's father, and the company's chief legal advisor. Margaret had collected evidence against him before her death. She placed copies in my mother's box because she believed it was the one place Thomas could never find. Alexander listened to the recording with his face in his hands. His closest friends had built their wealth on fraud, intimidation, and 2 deaths. His wife had investigated them alone because she feared he was too loyal to see the truth. I failed both of them, he said. Then do not fail them now, I replied. We gave the original evidence to federal investigators. Mr. Caldwell suspended Thomas Vale and Vanessa that same day, but Daniel still believed he could save himself. He came to my apartment carrying flowers and wearing the same expensive watch he had bought while limiting me to $100 for a dress. He admitted that he had told Vanessa about the bank, but claimed he had done it to protect me. Then Maya played a recording supplied by investigators. Daniel's voice was clear. Give me the executive position, he had told Vanessa, and I will convince Claire to hand over the necklace and whatever is in that box. Daniel turned pale. You recorded me, he whispered. No, I said. The people you trusted recorded you. He fell to his knees, just as Alexander Caldwell had at the party. But the 2 moments could not have been more different. Alexander knelt because the truth had humbled him. Daniel knelt because the truth had trapped him. He begged me not to leave. He said no mistake should not destroy a marriage. It was not one mistake, I told him. It was 100 choices. You hid me. You lied about me. You searched my phone. You sold my safety for a promotion. The only thing you regret is losing. I filed for divorce that week. The investigation grew quickly. Thomas Vale was charged with obstruction, conspiracy, witness intimidation, and financial crimes. Vanessa cooperated with prosecutors, but she lost her position and faced charges for attempting to suppress evidence. Several retired officials were investigated. Richard Vale had died years earlier, but the public finally learned what he had done. Caldwell Industries paid a major settlement to families harmed by the unsafe housing projects. Alexander sold part of his personal holdings to create a fund for residents and for the families of the employees who died in the fire. He also offered me $10 million. I refused the personal gift. Instead, I asked him to establish the Eleanor Bennett and Margaret Caldwell Foundation. Its mission would protect whistleblowers, support foster children, and help women rebuild their lives after financial or emotional abuse. He agreed, but insisted that I lead it. For the first time in my life, I accepted a position, not because someone needed me to remain quiet, but because my voice mattered. Daniel was fired after the investigators confirmed his attempt to trade evidence for a promotion. During our divorce, he tried to claim part of any money connected to the necklace. The judge rejected his demand. Our financial records also showed that he had hidden marital funds in a private account. The court ordered him to repay what he had taken. The man who had been ashamed of my $78 dress lost his job, his reputation, his secret savings, and the wife who had supported him when he had nothing. Some people called that revenge. I called it a receipt. 1 year later, I attended the foundation's first public event at the same hotel where Daniel had hidden me. I wore the same navy blue dress. Rosa, the shop owner, had adjusted it slightly, and I wore my mother's necklace above my heart. This time, when I entered the ballroom, Alexander Caldwell introduced me himself. He told the audience that Eleanor Bennett had saved lives by preserving the truth, and that Margaret Caldwell had spent decades refusing to let her friend's name disappear. My mother was officially cleared of every accusation. A framed photograph of both women was placed in the company's headquarters. When I walked onto the stage, the room rose in a standing ovation. I thought I would feel victorious. Instead, I felt my mother's absence. I wished she could see that she no longer needed to hide. I held the necklace and remembered her words. "You were loved before you even knew my name." At last, I understood. She had not only meant her own love. She meant Margaret's loyalty, June's protection, and the courage of every person who had carried a small piece of the truth until I was ready to receive it. I looked across the ballroom. The curtain where Daniel had hidden me was still there. For a moment, I saw my old self standing behind it, quiet, ashamed, waiting for permission to enter her own life. Then I began my speech. I told the audience that dignity does not come from a designer label. Loyalty does not require silence. And love that asks you to become smaller is not love. It is control wearing a familiar face. Daniel once believed my cheap dress made me unworthy of being seen. But that dress became the last thing I wore before I stopped hiding for him. And the necklace he dismissed as old and worthless did more than expose a 30-year-old crime. It returned my mother's name, revealed my husband's true character, and gave me the courage to choose myself. That night, I did not destroy Daniel's future. I simply stepped aside and allowed his own choices to reach him. Because the most powerful revenge is not making someone suffer. It is becoming the person they tried to convince you that you could never be, and letting them watch from the place where they left you. My husband hid me behind a curtain because he was ashamed of how little my dress cost. In the end, the whole world saw my worth, and he finally learned that the cheapest thing in that ballroom had never been my dress.